I can't call it out. And, I don't know the people that were involved. This is a first time situation meeting these people. Again, the perception of she's a problem, she's, making something out of nothing. But in that moment, I said, what the hell? This guy just cut me off and I was in a conversation with somebody.
His conversation was more important.
Welcome to Hands on Heroes podcast. I'm Val Crafton, the voice of grit. I champion the people who power progress and prove that the future is built by those willing to get their hands dirty. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Hands on Heroes podcast. We are in the studio live with my friend Renae, and I'm so excited about this conversation. And we're going to start with her human story. First, I'm going to ask Renae to kind of tell us a little bit about you and how you ended up in the world of construction.
Great. Thanks for having me, Valerie. It's a privilege to be on your show or your podcast. I've been following, since Hands on Heroes started, and I'm really excited for what you're doing. I have been in construction for, I want to say, roughly 20 years or so. And it didn't start out as a clean path. It started out with me working 2 jobs in retail and banking, not knowing what I was going to do with my life, just trying to get into the grind, make a paycheck, and make a living. Right. And that's the only thing that I knew how to do. I got tired of that, and obviously, as one would, and thought, okay, maybe I need to work in a different environment. Where can I go that I could find some stability and have an actual career that I could focus on? Growing up, I didn't really have my eyes set on a particular career because we didn't grow up financially stable. It was just, you see the grind, you have to put in the work, you have to pay the bills just to keep a roof over your head. That's what I grew up with. And finding my way into the construction industry, I actually found my way into a temp agency doing some administrative work. And they placed me at a steel company, and then they also placed me at an engineering firm that had a construction management arm. So that was my first glimpse into the industry as a whole, and that's where I got my spark. I got my spark from seeing, female engineers in their role, excelling as managers, leading wherever they were at, and I wanted to be in that position, but I knew I didn't have the ability to go to school. Once I was able to visit a job site in person, go to some of the constructability reviews, I was able to see the construction side of the house. And that's where I really got hooked. And I found that I absolutely wanted to be there. There were so many components, different people, different disciplines, all involved in putting this facility together, whether it was a bridge, a roadway, a building, a sound wall, anything that just brought so many different people together. And I wanted to be in the middle of all of it. So that's where my interest started. And continuing through my career, it just continued to have me grow and learn as I was going along. A lot of times just staying up late at nights, reading textbooks that weren't mine because I wasn't able to go to school, reading drawings and asking questions left and right for the people around me.
Amazing. So, but you've done some traveling. I mean, you've not only done construction here in the US, but also abroad.
Yes, I have. So I've done a lot of work in Guam. I was actually in Guam for about 8 years.
Amazing.
In total. I started out there when I moved, followed a bad relationship out there to begin with. So that's not really the story I want to focus on. But when I moved out there, I didn't know anybody. I just fell into the trait of needing to work, needing to provide. Did a few side jobs here and there, again, retail, anything that I could pick up. And eventually I found my way into GC, general contractor. They only wanted to pick me up as a project coordinator, which I was fine with. It's still construction related. Yeah. It still lets me use that background that I developed through the architectural and engineering firm. And it was giving me more of a glimpse into the construction industry.
I think the project coordinator is a really great place to pause and talk about what it means to be a project coordinator, because I do know so many women who actually enter into the field through the project coordinator route. And I think I find that as the most non-traditional path into getting in to the field and becoming a project manager eventually is starting off as a project coordinator. So let's talk about what project coordinators do. I mean, outside of just the administration work, it goes way beyond that.
It does. It does. And the company that I was with at the time really allowed for that role to expand into more,
Right.
Giving me more territory to grow. So with that contractor, a project coordinator meant, not only the administrative portion, the invoice portion, but it was also coordinating among the teams for deliveries, logistics, procurement, things like that can support the superintendent, support the foreman on the job. So it was a little bit more hands-on than what some people may think that it was. I can't say that for all companies because they all handle it a little bit differently. Yeah. I have some men that are project coordinators within my team that are doing very similar to where I started, which is orchestrating the logistics, figuring out the procurement deliveries, working with all the different vendors to get everything on site as they need to. So if that role is giving you that vision into the industry and into all the different components, it's definitely very supportive in leading you into project management or, anything beyond that. And that's where I went.
Yeah. I mean, I have seen them go as far as process the RFIs, and maybe they didn't write them, but they're processing them. They're touching a lot of components. Maybe they're updating a schedule. They don't know how to do scheduling, but they're giving the data to put into the schedule, and they're learning a program. Maybe it's P6 or something like that that is commonly used by a lot of construction companies. And I just think that, I had someone on the podcast who's an electrician, and she's like, hey, if you can't find an apprenticeship, then maybe go to a material supply store and start learning the materials. And so I feel like the coordinator is a really great place to you don't need a lot of background, right? You don't need any background. You could, although you didn't come in to it from scratch, but it is a great opportunity if you're kind of transitioning from administration into a coordinator and then naturally into a field engineer, where you actually start maybe managing some of those trades that are a little less complicated and less technical, like, millwork, flooring, wall finishes, and things like that. You start to grasp what it means to coordinate the trades. And so that's kind of that next little step. But the coordinator, sometimes they'll update a schedule. They'll process an RFI. They'll process a submittal. Did they review the submittal and make sure it was correct? No, someone else did that. But that doesn't mean you can't be standing by that person and asking questions and say, what are you looking for? How did you approve this submittal? So that you can continue to provide value and grow and learn. So I think there's a level of curiosity there, right?
There is, absolutely. And being in that position where you can work with a variety of different team members and site members to get that information is really beneficial. And honestly, that's where it took me from project coordinator to project engineer, field engineer role, where I was able to split majority of my time on site and in the office, in the site trailer. So I was able to see both sides of the coin going through as I was entering into those roles.
I think it's incredible because here you've got a front row seat to the entire business from end to end, for that matter. Even when I've been in pre-construction, and we have coordinators in the pre-construction world as well, not just in the field. And in pre-construction, what that looks like is really very similar. You may be calling the trades and asking them for bids. You might even learn how to do a takeoff, something simple like a floor takeoff, nothing too technical. And you start to learn quantity surveying, and it's just little pieces, but you're asking questions, you're learning more. And then eventually maybe you can build up to a full-time estimator and procurement person and understanding supply chain and pre-construction and contracts, for that matter, and what type of contracts that we work with and why do we work with them and how do they differ from other types of contracts. I think it's a really great space that if you're a coordinator, I would definitely recommend being on both the office and the field, because they go hand in hand together. One sets the other one up for success. And then the other one brings back the lessons that they learned in the field back to the pre-con for that next project. So it's this continuous improvement cycle. How valuable are you if you can understand both? You'll quickly rise. And you're such a beautiful example of what grit looks like, curiosity looks like, self-taught learning looks like. But you didn't stop there. You went beyond that. So talk to us. What's next?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you mentioned all of that because it's so true to see all of the different aspects. I was shoulder to shoulder with a lot of the superintendents in the field, the foreman, overseeing a lot of the work, writing some of the contracts. Again, through the eyes of a project engineer, being able to be really in depth into what a lot of these contracts were saying, the scopes, the deliverables. And then, continuing on, I just wanted to keep building up my expertise, keep building on more of that knowledge because I loved what I was doing.
Yeah.
I never saw myself getting into management. I loved being out in the field. I loved being able to solve problems and solve challenges left and right. So I never, I think when I did an early mentor protege program, early on, I said, I'm not going into management. I want to stay within this territory where I've got this great mix of field and office, and I want to be able to grow within this realm. But naturally, you
progress.
It calls and responsibility is there, and I'm always one to just jump after it because I know I love the challenge. I love going after all of this new, unique things that other people may be intimidated by.
Right.
That's where I feel like I can excel, is when I'm learning something that other people are shying away from. So through that project engineer role, I ended up going in through a assistant project manager. I was a supplement to the quality control manager. I was an alternate safety person. So I took on whatever hat that I could and just learned every facet of the industry that I could at that moment in time. And then ultimately, I was able to come into project management, be more responsible, take more of the lead a team. And then I was a program manager overseeing an entire campus. And that's where I was able to kind of coordinate all the scopes, see a lot more of the back end design teams, commissioning teams, everybody else involved with the entire process. And I just loved where I was going. So thinking back to those days where I was thinking I was just going to stay in this specific territory, I had no idea I would even get where I was at.
I mean, it's so true. And I think that's what's so lovely about construction in general is not only is it never the same, every project's different. Even if you're building the same type of design, there's always something different about it because you're working with different teams and different people. You're in a different location. There's so many varying aspects there. So you're never going to get bored. And then simultaneously, there's so many paths that you can take and touch. And, being with a general contractor is a really cool thing because we do wear multiple hats at any given point, whether you're a BIM coordinator, scheduler, an estimator, change control, cost control, risk, quality control. You're actually out there project managing and coordinating the trades. You're touching every single piece of that. And no matter what, we all wear the safety hat for sure. And so when you said program, and that might confuse some folks, and program is really when there's multiple projects going on within the same vicinity, or possibly, within the same region as well. So let's talk about what that looks like. And we usually see that with a bigger corporate development. You segued into data center at some point. Let's talk about that transition.
So that transition was a surprise to me. I was building a lot of federal facilities, really great projects that I was able to be on. I got to work on naval wharves and Air Force hangars, and I got to see all of this military equipment up front. I got to be, supporting our nation in a different facet by rebuilding and building their facilities. Then I get the call to come out and work on a data center project. And, first glance, I was like, it's just a giant substation. What's the big deal? No idea. So I went in blind, but they put my name on a org chart. And next thing you knew, I was on a plane coming out here to Phoenix. And then I was on my first data center job. And it was for one of the hyperscalers, and I came out to be a assistant project manager and work on that team. And Yeah. Then I started learning more about data centers.
And that's where we intersect and met
We
officially
did. Yeah.
is on that site. So that was a nice little blessing in disguise, I think, to have found a good friend in this industry and have another wonderful, amazing woman to know. And so now that you're here, you've gone through this whole path, you've had a lot of experiences. And along the way, you decided that you needed to take on a passion project. Let's talk about your passion project and what really, I don't know how, if you want to talk about what triggered it or what drove it, but why did you develop it? What is it? Just kind of give us the insights to this passion project. And I have a little glimpse of it here with me, which is her book, Build Her. We will have the links to this book with us for you to find, order, read, but let's learn all about it.
Buildher.org was established on a passion, like you said. Mm-hmm. I had gone through these experiences. I had gone through learning these different projects, learning these different scopes, different challenges with not only projects, but with people as well. And I've said this on a different podcast that I didn't feel like I actually belonged in this industry until about 12 to 15 years in. And because before that, I was constantly guessing myself. I was constantly wondering if I am enough, if I know enough, if I'm capable enough to be here. And it wasn't until about between years 12 and 15, it's a wide range, absolutely. But that's when I started hearing it come from my team members. They were saying, one day we're going to be working for you. One of my superintendents told me that. So I had other gals come up to me that I haven't had interactions with, but they said, I really look up to you as a woman in construction. And those are the things that started to stick with me as, hey, maybe I do know what I'm doing, and it's silly to say that it took that long to get there, but it did.
Yeah. Sometimes people never get there.
There's a lot of days where I have those ups and downs where I still question it. Yeah. But in that time frame, and then beyond that, I continued to grow and continued to learn. And I started seeing younger women enter the industry, and they started to interact with the same situations that I started to see early on.
Right.
And this was several years ago.
Right. So you're starting to see them deal with things that you dealt with decades before they were even entered the field. And Correct. It hadn't changed.
And it hadn't changed. It may have changed slightly, just as, maybe things were happening in darker corners, or maybe things were being said where certain people weren't in the room. But things were still going on, and I did not like that idea of a woman entering the industry, same as me, that young age of 19, 20 years old, and, being talked over, being, demoralized, interrupted. She was, seen as an object of entertainment. So I did not like seeing that. I did not like hearing about it. And I wanted to find my personal way of trying to combat that, trying to reach these women and let them know, hey, you're able to set boundaries. Don't feel like there's a rite of passage to deal with all of this bullshit.
Right. 100%.
Just to be in construction, because it's not necessary. You deserve respect. You deserve to be here. And through that, I felt like the best way to reach any woman was just through story. And in the book I tell a little bit about my story, but I really built it out where they can start to talk about their own personal values.
You leave pages in there for you to write notes to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I love that part of the book. Yeah.
There's write-in prompts, there's journaling. Yes. And it's less me focused, but more focused on the reader.
Yes.
So that she can feel, not isolated, not alone in a lot of the things that she's dealing with.
100%. Having been in the industry myself for a really, really long time, I know exactly what I feel. That I want to just pause and just say, and acknowledge that we have come a long way. If you go back to 3 decades ago, I went into college because I couldn't get a job as a laborer, even though I could frame a house from the ground up, and nobody was really taking me seriously. So I thought college was how I was going to get taken seriously. But then you get into the space and you realize that the surroundings, the environment, the benefits, the different things are just not there that make you feel like you belong. So just from that path. And so then you start to, over the years, we've seen things happen and evolve where now men are getting paternity leave so that we can balance the field, but then we shame the men for wanting to take it. And even having had babies in my 40s, it was really easy for me to quickly see, have we actually come as far as we need to? And seeing fast forward, less than a decade ago, where if you took maternity leave, then all your benefits stop. You didn't have a lot of those things in place. Or you were told, this is my true story. I was told that if I couldn't present to clients because if I did, that client might think I'm not going to come back after having a baby. And so now your ability to progress, your ability to show, hey, I can present, I can win work, I can take on these bigger, more executive level type of opportunities are holding you back. And so I think that if we're going to say, hey, let's attract more women and then keep them, we have to not have to make laws to force people to put things in place that make women feel like they're comfortable. But then there are cultures where there's a lot of women in the leadership realm. There's a nice balance or a nice mix. And when I talk to women in those types of cultures, they seem to have a very different experience. And I do believe it's because they have more women in the leadership role who have decision-making power, that the culture really has developed a space where they feel like they belong and they can actually grow within that company. So I don't think it's all bad. I think there's a lot of good out there. We've come a long way, but we're not changing the very basics even to make them feel like they belong. So back to then your point. Here we are, we're in the field. I can still remember catcalling was okay. So that's how far back I can go. Fast forward, I don't hear that anymore. I don't hear that type of thing, but I do still see the looks, the interruptions, the not being taken seriously. If someone says something and then somebody else says it,
then it's valid.
It's validated somehow. And that really pushed me into kind of driving toward more of a data driven conversation. It pushed me into that space because of those experiences. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to have to be up against people with the loudest voices in the room, because I'm not allowed to show up in the same way. I have to show up in my feminine space, right? Because if I try to show up in a masculine space, it just doesn't come off right. It's looked down upon. And so I have to show up in my feminine space. And how can I lead from that? Well, I'm going to lead from non-emotions, data, and facts. And that's really how I've kind of paved my path and gotten my voice heard. But a lot of times these newer folks who are just entering in, they haven't kind of figured all those pieces out. They're still developing. And there was a statistic I read where they're actually leaving as fast as we get them in. And even up to the point where, we say that construction is a space where you have to have tough skin, especially mission critical. It's fast paced, no excuses. It really does attract high performers, people with a lot of grit. And you pause a lot because you think, wow, do I belong here? And you look for allies, but 99% of the time, you're still the only woman in the room. And so you're looking for those allies. You're looking for someone who's going to stand up and say, hey, you had an idea. Please finish that thought. You were interrupted. We need our allies to stand up and say those things, because if we say it, then it comes across differently than if someone.
Then we're the problem. We're difficult.
We're difficult.
I had this actually happen the other day.
Wow.
So it still continues to happen, right? I was in a discussion with someone, and it was a male, and we were discussing a project. And somebody came around from the side and just completely interrupted, cut off the conversation, and hijacked that conversation. And I sat there scratching my head as if, okay, I don't exist. That was a bit rude in a professional setting. I can't call it out. And, I don't know the people that were involved. This is a first time situation meeting these people. Again, the perception of she's a problem, she's, making something out of nothing. But in that moment, I said, what the hell? This guy just cut me off and I was in a conversation with somebody.
His conversation was more important.
and it still continued. So those things continue to happen to all of us, and we see them. Whether or not the person I was talking to caught on to it also or didn't, if he did, it would have been nice to know, like, hey, let me finish up and finish our conversation, then I'll shift over to you.
Right.
And the funny thing about it, and this is just such a contrast of personalities and the way people operate, is he was talking with somebody else prior to me walking up. I kind of sat idly by and was being patient and being respectful of them continuing their conversation. When I saw the handshake and they parted ways, then I made my entrance. But I didn't get that same opportunity. And that, it pissed me off. Yeah. I told a couple of people, I'm like, how does this continue to happen where we're just easily brushed aside? And another situation was at a conference where I was having a discussion with another woman, just getting to know her. And then somebody comes over the top and completely interrupts our conversation because he heard something I had said. And then he was poking fun at it. Don't know this guy, but he felt like he needed to intersect and make an ass out of me for whatever reason it was.
Interesting.
And it happens. It happens so much that I was talking with a friend yesterday that in most moments you can't react because you don't know which is the right way to react in that time. But in some moments, if they catch you on the right day, absolutely. Right. I'll stand my ground and shut that shit down. Right. But there's so many opportunities that we just let slide by because we're just stuck in that moment of, well, do I want to look like a problem? Do I want to make a big scene?
Right.
This episode is powered by Mod 42, the modular data center company redefining speed to market. From design to delivery, Mod 42 brings precision manufacturing, quality assurance, and trusted execution to every build. When reliability can't wait, Mod 42 delivers. Learn more at mod42.com.
Again, I feel like we've come a long way, but these incidents do still happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when talking about them, some people just aren't self-aware. And would they do that same thing to a man? I don't know. Would they? Are they just rude across the board? Or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or would they have interrupted and poked fun at a guy? Maybe that's just who they are. I mean, it's possible. I'm going to play devil's advocate right now. But the reality of it is it's rude. It's wrong. I don't care if you're male or female. It's not okay. If you see it, say something, stand up for us. It is really, and maybe it's more common because the industry is mostly men. And so it comes from men. But I've had women say, no, women are the worst. Women are way worse than men. I'm like, okay, exactly how? There's not enough of us to say that. And I've spent so much time with the women that they have, I've never met so many hype women in 1 year than I have in this last year. And I feel really blessed to be surrounded by them. They're when you go back to your space, you really are the only one. Or if you go to a conference, you really are one to hundreds, right? You're still quite isolated. So why is that? And I think you said something earlier where you said, hey, I started seeing women kind of experiencing some of the things I experienced, and I wasn't okay with that. So I'm going to help give them a voice. I'm going to help say, hey, here's a place, here's my story. And I think that's where it falls short is the women who have gone through the ranks ahead of you and I have gotten to the top and they forgot about those stories. They forgot about the struggles, or they went through the struggles and they think, well, we all should go through those same struggles.
The rite of passage, like
exactly.
That's what it is.
But men don't do that to each other. And so this what they call like a queen bee mentality of you're a leader and you're a female. You are meant to pave the way and make it easier for women, not the same hard ladder that you had to climb, because it's already still hard. To your point, things are still happening. It's rude. It's not right. I mean, we could sit here and debate with people because I know there's a lot of differing opinions on this. We can debate with people, but I ran into somebody, my goodness, graduated like maybe a semester before me, but I had already been working in construction in the field probably a decade before this person, even though we went to college at the same time. And ran into this person, worked on this very first project together, and they reduced me to an intern. And this is 21 years later. This is how they introduced me. This was my intern. I was not your intern, first of all. You and I graduated. This was your first project. The person who I was an intern to is now a pretty big wig inside a huge company. And that says something way different than to reduce me to a crowd of people. And that was less than a year ago. It's just like, that's how you're going to introduce me, as not your peer, but your intern. I was not your intern. And so I just it kind of threw me off a little bit. I just felt reduced, all of those years of hard work, just reduced down to nothing. And I just thought to myself, I would never introduce somebody and reduce them all the way down to an intern if they'd been in the field for that long. And so I did. I stepped back and I asked that same question. I'm like, would they have done that if I was their male peer counterpart? And I just thought that was a little strange way of introducing me to a group of people, because the person's response, you were his intern? I'm older than he is. Like, that was a very confusing moment. And I just kind of just stood there and I really wasn't sure what to say. And rather than just introduce myself, been in mission critical for over 21 years. Nice to meet you. Let me just set the record straight really quick. And I, you were saying you're not sure if you can say something, but I almost want to, if we don't say something though, if we don't get courageous, just say, hey, I don't want to be rude, but I just want you to know that really kind of crossed my own boundaries of you interrupting. I had a full conversation going. And sometimes we are told to be polite. Don't be troublemakers. Don't, be quiet, kind of put your head down and do your job and the reward will come. But I have not found that to be true. I don't have someone advocating for me. I don't have someone sitting there talking about saying, hey, look at all these great things Val's doing. Right. You kind of have to I've always had to document all of my cha-ching moments myself and then feed that up to my management so that they understood all the things I did, where I saved money, where I improved a process, where I saved the schedule, where I did this, and this. And they weren't tracking that. And so I think that's probably my advice, for women who are in these situations. Track your own cha-ching moments. Track your own lessons learned, because those are definitely going to be the things they're going to remember. Mm-hmm. And I think that's for anybody entering into this field. If you're tracking your lessons learned, then you can actually talk about the things that they might bring up, what you learned from it and what you implemented to improve on it. So that can't be the focus on why you don't go promoted, that why you don't get held back. Not that it will necessarily change. I was reviewing a few people LinkedIn profiles at the same company the other day, and I couldn't help but notice, out of these two leaders, the woman, who was pretty significant, had actually climbed the ranks, had been at the same company the entire time. And I thought that was really impressive. And she was in a very high role. And then the male counterpart, same thing, been with the same company in a really high role, both high level, I would consider a C-suite executive, their entire career at the same company. And then I looked at every step they took, the exact same steps. And then I looked at how long each of them spent in those years at each of those steps. She arrived 6 to 7 years after the male counterpart did. She spent almost, I counted on average, almost twice as long in every step than he did. And do I know the whole story? Absolutely not. Do I want to ask? 100%.
Yeah, I also would love to know because a lot of the conversations that I've had is, women continue to be questioned on their authority, their knowledge, their expertise, their credentials. And I read an article, a research paper on, a lot of women are put in that scenario of, well, let's wait and see if she's capable, where in the sense of, their counterpart that's male, it's automatically he's capable, he's ready. But then with the women, it's just, let's wait and see if she's actually capable.
I mean, I can still remember it like it was yesterday. I was standing in the field. I was the project manager in charge. And I had an intern standing next to me. And I was showing him around the site, talking to him about the safety. He had never been on a job site before. In fact, I remember it was kind of funny because we were in Arizona and one of those dust devils come in traveling across, and you could see it coming. You know how those little walls of dirt, but the little dust. And he looked at me and goes, "What do we do?" And I was just like, "Close your mouth. You have safety glasses on. You should be okay. You're going to want to clean your ears out when you get home. There's going to be dirt all in your ears." But it was just kind of interesting. It was a funny story, but he's standing there and someone came up and started asking him about something. And I was like, looked at him and first of all, this is this guy's first week on the job site. You know very well that you've seen me. I knew exactly who this person was, but I don't know why they addressed him. So he's the intern. This question is for me. I'm your project manager. And they just went, "Oh, sorry." As if they had a moment, a lapse of forgetfulness, I suppose. We'll give them some grace. And then, we solved whatever the problem or question was, and he went on his merry way. But I just thought that was interesting. I'm like, I've been on this job site for a year. This person just showed up, and you still addressed him over me. And I just thought that was so ironic.
Yeah, and it happens a lot where we're questioned if we're here to fix the badges or if we're here to take notes. I've heard so many stories that align with that, where the perception that, whether or not it's just embraced by society that women and men have these roles. So it may not just be construction, but constantly these women, all of us are fighting through these same situations. 100%. And, when you're early in your career, when you're just starting out, you don't see it nearly as much. You think it's just all yourself. Maybe I need to work harder. And that's where the book comes into play, where I can try to reach them and try to start a sense of conversation between them on other things that we've all experienced, pairing it with some research that I've done that support a lot of these conversations between, the different genders and the workplace. So giving them an avenue to say, this happens, to other people, not just me. Yeah. That gives them a sense of, I'm not alone in this. I can find community somehow. Let me try to build that with another woman. If she's in another trade or if she's in another role, that's one way that we could come together and start to really invest in the culture and invest in a community where we can lean on each other and support each other.
Right. I mean, we don't want to be man bashers. This is not what this is about. But it is majority men. So I think statistically, it ends up being the men in the situation creating the problem. And for those who are just sort of indoctrinated into this space and they've not evolved into, I think, the future generation, you see the younger generation coming in. I don't see that as much from the younger generation as much as the older generation. So I'm really hoping that is the big wave that changes things. I am seeing a lot more empathy. I'm seeing a lot more emotional intelligence. I see men holding more boundaries, insisting on taking their paternity leave, which really helps us because then it really does level the playing field. For sure. And I think we'll eventually get there. But at the same time, you need to just stop and start to get a little more self-aware. Whether you're female and you're in a leadership role, and are you putting yourself out there and helping pave the way. And who are you taking under your wing, right? Are you being the open, approachable leader that you need to be? Because a lot of the queen bees are not. They are very closed door. They are not approachable. You can't ask them questions. And they've worked so hard to get to where they are. Share those lessons learned. Advise. I had someone say that they had a female leader say that her skirt was too short and that she shouldn't go out and mingle with the guys for like happy hour and so forth. It was inappropriate. I said, but how else am I supposed to internally network? And I shouldn't wear skirts because the men can't keep their mind in the right space. I mean, you're like, I have so much to say about this.
I do. And it's funny that you bring it up because it seems like a constant battle. And I'm sure a lot of ladies, and yourself included, can feel it, where I can wear a dress, a skirt, and be maybe taken seriously in a more executive setting. When I step on site, they're going to believe that I've never been on a job site before. I don't belong there. You know, who is she to tell me what to do? Who is she to ask me these questions? So, you know, in the alternative sense, if I was wearing my PPE, my boots, my jeans, and I step into a meeting, then I'm a worker bee and I'm not the decision maker.
Right.
So we're constantly fighting this battle, and women especially, because we have to wear these different facades to prove that we belong in one setting or another. Right. I think you and I had talked about this before, where it's that constant judgment of, why is she in that position if, you know, she doesn't look the part? And
100%. It's unconscious bias of who belongs. And it starts at a very, very young age. We start planting seeds and start telling little boys that blue is for boys and pink is for girls. We start telling them that construction is for boys and put construction in trucks, and we give girls kitchen and little mops and vacuums and baby dolls, and say, here, not that there's anything wrong with being a mommy, but not every woman wants that. Like, some of us want careers. And so we, from a very early age, we tell children where they belong. And I have had the unconscious bias happen with a woman. And in fact, it's what inspired Hands on Heroes, actually, altogether, where I walked into my kid's school and the director of the school was a female educator. And she ran a STEM program. That was an incredible program. And they were having Heroes of the Neighborhood Week. And in that program, they didn't have a construction worker. And I said, well, why don't you have a construction worker? And she's like, why would I have a construction worker? I go, because the neighborhood wouldn't exist without her. But that wasn't the thing. It was bigger than that. One, we stopped introducing construction to kids. That's a whole nother subject. From an unconscious bias, though, when I told her, I said, would you like me to represent that construction worker since it's this week and you need a volunteer? I'm volunteering. Her response was, oh, you're in construction? You don't seem like the type. And what type is that? I'm not sure what type that is. And her response, and I said that, and she went, oh, I would love to have you. And I think she realized, that was my kind of kind way of saying, hey, unconsciously, you're telling me I didn't belong in my own industry. And so here's a female who had that unconscious bias moment. And then I walked into the classroom, and that is when I knew I had to do something about it. And a little boy, and when my kids finally recognized who I was, because I had all this PPE on, and they were like, my mom's a construction worker. A little boy, here we are again, unconscious bias. He went, moms can be construction workers. And I went, yeah, buddy, moms can be construction workers because we're just not as well represented. So a lot of times boys don't get to see girls in those positions until they're doing the job, or maybe they're in the education realm. Maybe they're lucky enough to actually have a mom and have that exposure, but it's so rare that it's not common. And so until it becomes common, we're probably never going to kill that unconscious bias completely. Just like when someone tells me you're a hairdresser and you're a man, or you're a nurse and you're a man, and you're just like, really?
Right. Yeah. In your head, you think of, certain genders representing
Absolutely.
certain roles. And it's not that we're getting offended by every interaction like that. No. It's just the sense that something within our culture and society is starting out at these young ages where we're not being completely open to the fact that, yes, women can be this role. Yes, men can be that role.
Right.
And let them know, like, hey, this is where that representation needs to take place. And part of what the organization does for builter.org is to help share those stories. Yeah. So one, we're giving you a journal, a workbook that you can take and have that private space to work out your personal thoughts, your personal experiences. And when you get to that point to be comfortable, then we're asking you to lead and lead those conversations, lead those environments so that you can influence that change as well. Because I feel like it's very important that we're not just sitting idly by and waiting for the system to change around us. We need to be actively involved in making that change happen.
100%. We can't just sit here and complain and bitch and cry about it. Woe is me. We actually have to bring awareness to it. And we can't do that alone. So you've actually taken your book and you actually created this initiative to where women of all the women can come together and bring their stories together. And now you're starting to see not just a story anymore. You're starting to see data. You're starting to see a trend. And it's the trend that gets addressed. Because now these aren't just Renae's story or Valerie's story. These are all women's stories collected into a space where, okay, now we can create that awareness and even some training and open conversations. And then suddenly the men, and I think sometimes men are like, I want to be an ally, but they don't know how. And that's where it opens the conversations on how you can be an ally and where can we start? Because we've had a recent incident, and I've talked about it on my podcast with my electrician podcast that just was released. I was heartbroken. I was heartbroken when I heard about Amber Check. And I just thought to myself, oh my goodness, we just set time back a decade. And I had the thought. And then I was at a community college talking to some students. And I was talking about different ways to get into construction. And one of the most popular ones was, I was talking about electrician and so forth. And a female raised her hand. And I'm not making this up. Her question was, how can I be sure that I'll be safe? And I just looked at her like, well, here's how you can be sure you can be safe. Whenever anything, you've got to say something. You got to find your mentors and your allies that you can go and talk to. Because a lot of times when you're on a project site, you don't have HR on the project site. And I can't say that everybody's HR is in your favor. I know some are for the people, but most of the time I've been from hearing stories, they really are there to protect the company and not the person. We're told to be tough. We're told to be thick skin. We're told to be brush it off. That's just how he is, or even she is, right? And wherever the bullying internally, the workplace bullying comes from, we have to take it seriously. We can't have things like that ever happen.
Yeah. And I agree. It's something that rocked a lot of us to the core.
Yeah.
And for me to be involved in this nonprofit that focuses on giving women that space to, build up their story, find allies and advocates, build that community right where they're at. And to hear Amber's story of what happened, it broke my heart trying to figure out. And I've had some friends that are, also doing different nonprofits that we've been scratching our heads trying to figure out where else we can support it. One of my friends, Jessie in Wisconsin, she's actually a welding teacher, and she's infusing it into her program for her students. So that's where she found a way that she can start to educate both men and women who are learning welding from her that, you see something, you say something. This is not a culture of men versus women. This is not a culture of, bullying's fun. Don't let those things slide. So right. I commend her on doing that. For myself, I've been redoing and thinking on the back end. I've been kind of quiet on the social media side with the nonprofit just because it's
we have no words.
We have no words. And the best that I was able to come up with was to work on the back end of the nonprofit and try to find different ways to build that community for discussion. for women throughout the industry. And like you mentioned, I share stories of women in various roles,
Right.
Because I don't want it to be, another separation of women on site between field women and office women, because everyone has their respective roles. And that office woman may have been in the field prior to. I kind of smirk when some people make fun of business development, because that's currently the role that I'm in now. And, I still can have the technical conversations. Mm-hmm. I still have my years that I spent on site. So when, you hear, oh, well, they're all BD gals, right? Like, then it's like, well, where were they before? And admin, like, I know someone that works in my company that she's back to a project coordinator. She's had several years with the company, but she was actually an iron worker and a welder prior to that. Wow. So once you hear those stories and you see, hey, maybe I shouldn't take those flash judgments at a woman who has expertise that she may be able to share with me, or maybe that person can share something that I don't know about. Right. And it starts to really support you within your career altogether. Mm-hmm. It's just opening your eyes to not making those flash judgments.
Well, like I said, we don't want to be in a man bashing space, but what we do want to do is bring awareness. And I think it's unconscious a lot of times, just out of habit, but just stepping back and saying, hey, maybe I shouldn't be interrupting this person. Or in the moment when you catch yourself, even if it's a habit, habits are hard to break, but apologizing at least and saying, oh, I did it again. I've been trying to get better at that, rather than thinking your voice is more important. And taking somebody under your wing and mentoring them. And especially if there's a woman on your team, become that ally, become that mentor, be that open door, because we need a place that we can go and kind of say, hey, is this one I should be concerned about? Or is this one an endearing moment where I should be like, oh, I'm just one of the team? Because there are those endearing moments. We talked about, kind of earlier about making fun or making her the joke or something like that. In some ways, that's endearing because we do that. That's where we poke fun at each other all the time.
Yeah, I had a superintendent that always would say, what was it? Good afternoon. Every time I would show up on site at 5:30 in the morning, and he'd say good afternoon. And it's just one of those fun, joking moments. And yeah, it kind of irks you every once in a while because like, shit, I can't get here like any earlier if I show up, and I've been at 2 a.m. concrete pours. Yeah. Oh, good afternoon. Yeah. Same thing. But he did it with everyone. Yeah. And it was just, it's one of those things where it's a little bit of teasing, but if it goes too far, that's when it comes into bullying. And I absolutely do support a lot of the male advocates and allies. I've had a lot of them in my career, a lot of men that I've learned from, and they kind of opened up the door to allow me to take site walks with them, or allowed me to try something, as far as responsibility, taking responsibility for something on site. And my book is written in that sense where if you're a male ally, it really opens up your eyes to different situations. Yeah. That you can apply your leadership to the various women on your team.
That's right.
There's no blanket scenario that is going to work with every single woman. Valerie's going to handle a situation differently than I would. Yeah. And, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So being able to be a male ally and read the book and kind of understand all the different scenarios, it gives them a little bit of a teaching moment for themselves to say, hey, I never considered that's what women are struggling with on the job site.
100%. I started using that's your outdoor voice, just a way of poking fun back at them if they say something kind of rude or inappropriate, and I know that, it's they need to watch it, because for me, I'm just like, okay, I'm thick skinned. I've been around in industry for a while, but I also want to create some awareness for you. Mm-hmm. And so I'll quickly be like, hey, that was your outdoor voice again, meaning you just crossed my boundary. And it's just my nice, kind way, but also poking fun back a little bit that, hey, you crossed a boundary there and you're using your outdoor voice again. And they chuckle and you're like, oh, and I do get that look in their eye, like, oh, you're right. Sorry about that. And I would always find that thing I could say without sounding, and you pick them up along the way. But if someone interrupts you, is there like a fun thing that you can say back? You're like, oh, I'm going to interrupt you since you interrupted me. I hope I don't offend you, or something. Just like make fun of this situation to kind of push yourself back in, because the reality of it is if we don't, then are we ever going to get taken seriously? I'm wondering, what can we do and have a little fun with it, but then also make a point. This honestly, that just came to me just now because I was thinking about some of the words I would use when I was in the field and how I would kind of bring awareness to it without without calling them out per se, because there's always people standing around.
and it's funny that you mentioned that, right? Because I am more than comfortable to do this on site. But in this new setting that I'm in,
more of a professional business setting.
More of a professional setting. And in my head, I'm still trying to weigh out the options. Like, what's the appropriate response, Renae? what's not going to get you, blacklisted from coming to this conference again? So I'm in this unique territory that's new to me, where it's on site. If I'm working on site daily, I can have those conversations easy because it comes naturally. But being in this new environment is just, okay, how are they going to take it?
Right. Right. And I think it's different than being in a office, because there's a switch from going from the field to the office. I know that I had to clean my language up, for example.
Yeah, I still need to. I still struggle.
I mean, I had to clean my language up when I went into the office. It was where we would drop an F-bomb, every other word in the field. Nobody blinked. In the office, I just waited for the first person to drop the F-bomb.
That's exactly what I do. Just as soon as somebody else breaks the seal, then it's all done. And then I know, okay, it's safe space.
We're in a safe space. We are in the safe space.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Get me. But in a conference setting, it is a very different space because you've got a mix of office, field, technical, non-technical. And you have, and here's one of the things I've been discovering. Interesting that you mentioned BD people with technical skills. I have met BD people without technical skills.
Yeah, there's absolutely a lot of those too.
and frankly, some of them, and I don't know why anybody would think anything less, because they go through a ton of training and they go and get certifications so that they can speak technically. They go on the job walks, they go out to the sites, they walk the vendor and the prefab, and they go and actually go out there and really learn. And I see women and men really putting their foot forward, saying, I want to understand this in a way that I wouldn't brush them off. But simultaneously, there are a few people who don't take those initiatives. And so they give the rest of us a bad rap. So you're not taken seriously. You must not be technical. I'm like, I don't think you understand. The reason why I'm in this role is because I can speak technical for you, because I do understand your client and your owner. And I'm going to be able to set you up for success because I used to be the person that is now your client. And so it's an interesting, like, how we all evolve and move around each other. And I think people sometimes forget that as people move through their career, they forget that you might be their boss one day. And where, someone else might be your boss tomorrow. And so we're all just human at the end of the day. We're just human. And to think that anybody is any less than the other is ridiculous. And if you took any time at all to actually get to know a person as a human first, who are they? Where do they come from? What is their background? Where were they before they were doing this? What do they like to do outside of the industry? If we all just took a minute and tried to just have a human connection, I think that we would find there's a lot of layers to all of us, and we wouldn't be so quick to judge at all. And so, it's certainly why, I lead I Am Women. I wanted to create a safe space where we could all kind of come together as professional women, leaving our titles and our companies at the door, and just be together as hype women who lift other women up, and mean girls not allowed.
And I love that about I Am Women. Honestly, I think I've told you this a dozen times, that you've created the space where I can actually get to know somebody, where it's not just flying by and handshake here, handshake there. Here's my business card. Call me if you need this. It's actually, I've been able to actually meet and engage with these people and, get to hear a lot of their stories. Like Monica's got a wonderful story.
Oh, hers is a beautiful story.
And, it's giving that space, and it's amazing to see. And it is all hype women, and being able to say their name in a space that they're not currently in, or bring other hype women together. I've been doing a lot of that lately.
Yes.
Connecting them together. Like, hey, you're a powerhouse lady in the STEM industry. I want you to meet another woman that's just killing it in the STEM industry. So let's make magic happen. Let's partner them up and have conversations from there, because, there's so much going on. There's so many different organizations, but yeah, if we don't get that time to take that human aspect in and really understand who we're working with.
And lift each other up. We are not in competition with each other.
Right.
And you know what? If you go get a role or a job, or your career moves in a progression that's faster or better than mine, you know what? Congratulations. That I'm going to be your biggest cheerleader. You were in the right place at the right time. You had the right mentors. You took the right step. All the things fell into place for you. And I'm so excited for you. I by no means am I going to be a hater. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And
it's
there's
ridiculous.
Seasons. There's seasons.
Everybody has their season.
That, maybe it's not the right move to be in that high demand, high paced project anymore, that role anymore. Right. And maybe they do want to step back. And the beauty about construction is that there's so much there that you can move between different roles. You can join a company. And, when I interviewed for my current role, that was one of the questions. They were looking at my resume. They're like, Renae, you've done so many great things. Why do you want to do business development? And I was straightforward with them. I said, I could be better at this. I could be better. I see this as a challenge to change my environment, change the way that I'm interacting on a job site, and see if I can excel and grow even further. Because I've gotten, with the experience comes knowledge in all of these various areas. Business development, marketing, communication has never really been at the top of the list. Right. So I saw it as a challenge, and I saw that's where I was going to be able to grow.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you mentioned that, because so many people think that there's a single path. You go to college, you take that first step, and you move into project management, and you move into the next role, and then you move in, and then you're at the same company. I said, but that doesn't have to be your path. I find that I've worked on the GC side. I've worn every hat in the build cycle. I've been on the owner side and the general contractor side. And then within the owner side, I've gotten to wear multiple hats again. And every time I've made a shift, every time I've moved, it just made me a stronger cross-functional aligned team member. I understand where you've been. I understand likely your pain points, because I've been there, or I've worked with you so much that similar role that it's not going to be much different. And how can I help you? And how can you help me? And we can work together and create win-win situations. And I just think that that's like the bigger picture at the end of the day. We put so much emphasis on where someone's been before, what they've done, rather than really valuing all of the experiences that they've had and how that makes them a more well-rounded person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And more well-rounded team member, easier to communicate with and work with, because you understand so many different aspects in the whole stream of all the things. And again, I think it goes back to a human.
Yep.
And so
the way that I see it, and it's funny you mentioned that. So in the book, I've actually got this section that allows you to identify how you got here into the industry. And I wish I had my copy, because I write in this all the time, but I try to develop like a roadmap of where you've been, where you started, I've had all of these different outlets, from customer service to retail to banking to, the contract side, the construction side. And you could see just our maps go all in so many different directions. It's never linear. And there's just so much that we can all learn and continue to grow in the industry.
I mean, you could look at the path and say, wow, you're really confused. Do you know what you want to do? Well, it's always been a step forward. It's always been a step up. It's always been a growth move. Why does it matter the actual path as long as it's always a step forward? And you know what? What if it was a step backward? Because, well, sometimes life happens.
And that's that season again,
and that's
right?
that season again. And so there's just so much, not only just from a female, male, who belongs, who doesn't belong. We're human, and nobody's path or story is the same. And we are in this really amazing industry. And if we can get down to the human and the why, then we'll see so much more value than we saw confusion before. And I think people forget to do that. They forget to see a human in front of them versus men or versus women at the end of the day. And it's going to take all of us to come together. And in fact, we're never going to fill all of the labor workforce if we can't attract more women.
And retain women.
And retain them. We've got to attract more women. We've got to attract more veterans. We've got to start thinking outside the box on how we hire. We've got to start thinking about cross-functional skills. Just because you're not a quantity surveyor, but you have a finance background. Well, some of the best cost managers and estimators have been finance backgrounds, not necessarily people who have come from the other things. So I think you can teach a lot of the technical skills. Do you have the soft skills? A lot of times it's a harder thing to teach. And they find that the more emotional intelligence you have within your team, the smarter the overall team is holistically. And that was proven by a study by MIT. And it just so happens MIT also did a study and said women actually have more emotional intelligence, and the teams with more women on their team actually were the smarter overall teams. So it's actually a good business decision to have a balanced, diverse team,
right,
versus the same type of group. And so if I walked onto a site and I saw all of the same type of person, I know that this project is not going to get done as smart maybe as a diverse group of people that actually had not only diverse backgrounds, but diversity within experiences and diversity in education and diversity in male, female, just like across the board. Those make smarter teams.
Yeah, absolutely. It brings together that whole cohesiveness, what construction is. Yeah. You can't just build a facility with one discipline or one trade.
Yep.
You need to bring everyone together to have this facility, one end goal.
Right.
And I feel like that's the same with the industry. The way that I've talked to some of our executive partners with the organization is that same concept. It's the building blocks to the overall industry. And I've got images where you've got the industry as a whole. You've got your specific trade or discipline. You've got your specific company. And every single time it drills back down to that initial building block, which is the individual.
Yes, every single time. And I think that if we can just look at people as individual, everybody's going to grow differently. They learn differently. We know that. And so when we're on a construction site and we're trying to solve a problem and you got a bunch of the same people trying to solve a single problem, then they're probably going to think of one way of getting it done versus someone who's kind of looking at it from a different perspective, whose brain might be wired a little differently, who brings different experiences and backgrounds. And that's why I love young people so much. When you bring young people on a site and they're full of questions and why and so forth, and you're just like, oh, that's a good question. I never really asked why. I just have always done it. But I'm really glad you're here asking why.
Yeah, and it helps you grow as a leader, 100%. As a manager, when you get asked those random questions that you may or may not know the answer to, but it makes you think differently.
Yeah.
And I used to love walking the site with somebody who was more novice in their career and have them ask a question that, I actually don't know the answer. Let's go figure it out together. You both grow in that sense. You build trust, you build a relationship just with that added perception.
Yeah.
100%.
I mean, I had someone tell me I was a safety hazard and I needed to put my hair up underneath my hat. I thought it was because he was concerned. I was going to get my hair caught on something when I was walking. And frankly, the hats really are not made for having a lot of hair. And so you put them on a bun, you have a headache at the end of the day. It makes the hat feel really, really tight, but you do it. But the reason why was because I was distracting. And a forklifter was sitting there going like this and looking and at me. And he said, I was distracting the forklift driver. And so I was a safety hazard. And I said, are you sure that I'm the problem in this situation? I don't mind putting my hair up under my hat, but don't you think you should go have a conversation saying, hey, you were driving heavy equipment on a very busy job site.
Yeah.
And he just looked at me and was like, that's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Right.
And in fact, I'm going to bring it up in the next safety meeting. And I, it was perspective. It was unconscious bias. I wasn't offended by it. I wasn't mad about it, but I did say something to him.
Yeah. Just bring light to it, you know, bring it to attention because again, they may not know any different.
Right. And so instead of making me feel like I didn't belong and shame me for having long hair, he totally took those words back and was like, oh, wow, that's a really great point. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to bring more women onto our site, we have to start looking at, well, what are those problems? I'm not a problem. My hair is not the problem. I do put all my hair up in my hat to this day. But I think of it from a safety perspective of I don't want to get my hair caught on something, not because I'm being distracting. And I think it's a really important conversation to have. And I love that you're bringing this to light and creating tools that allow allies and the women in the industry to have a voice, put their voice down on paper, come together as a team of women and men for that matter, and talk about, hey, how can we make this a space that makes everyone feel like they belong? Mm-hmm. Because let's call it what it is. We have the highest suicide, the highest alcoholism. It's very stressful, very stressful. And it's unfortunate that women do have a higher emotional intelligence because we are allowed to exercise our empathy at a very young age. And if, for example, if someone falls on a playground where our friends are running over and helping us and we're walking to the nurse together and we're crying and we're okay. That's okay to cry. But if a boy did that, oh, you're fine. Get up, rub some dirt in it, move on. Crying is not for boys, and they're not allowed to have emotions. And so they have to suppress these. Yeah. And so they're not open to talking about how they're feeling and so forth. So I do think that from an emotional standpoint and back to the human, when we think about safety, we have to say something to do something. We have to be allies and speak up. And we have to have open conversations. You've created beautiful tools to guide that conversation. And we can't accept that's just how they are anymore. And because everybody deserves to have a safe space to work. They should not have to wonder, should I go into that field? How can I be sure if I'm going to be safe? I'm still just floored. Like within days of this happening, I just thought, are you kidding me? We've just rewound like a decade's worth. My entire career, I have never seen anybody on a job site get attacked ever. But one time, and suddenly we have a whole generation who's talking about it. And so it's a problem. It can escalate. And I have had a male come into an office setting and attack another male with a ball bat. And it was a really, really sad, the person lost their life. And it was really sad. And so that was not even in the field. Again, this goes back to a human. And we all have to remember that we're all just trying to put food on the table, put a roof over our house, over our heads, and take care of our families, take care of ourselves. And we just have to love on one another and really understand there's a human behind all of it at the end of the day. So I'm super excited. So if somebody wanted to learn more about your program, bring these tools inside their own setting, really open up these conversations and say, hey, we don't want this happening on our job sites. We don't want this happening in our office. How can we have that conversation? Where can we find your tools?
So build-her.org is the website. It's currently going under a refresh to help build that community space. But that's where I sell the book. That's where a lot of the, group forms and tools are to help build out those conversations. Actually, in the back of the book, I've created all of the sample conversation points so that if you're in a position to lead, if you're more senior in the group and you want to lead a discussion, it's right there in the back of the book as well. I also lead and support the development of workshops. I've led a couple of workshops here locally with a couple of different firms to help drive that conversation. And then I'm in discussion with others to help drive that conversation where, maybe I'll come in to start the conversation, but it's really focused on the group and building that community to help them be more open to these various perspectives. One of my clients brought in men to the conversation because they had that safe space developed, and it's opening their eyes.
Yes.
They're able to speak about these certain topics. And that's honestly what the focus of the book and the organization is creating that community, creating that space, sharing these stories so that you don't look at these people as a number or, a worker. They're actually a person, a human in the industry that needs that support and needs that advocacy.
100%. And I like that. I like that they included men in the conversation because a lot of men who are managing teams with women on the team, they want to know, how can I be a good manager for them? What can I do to make them feel like they belong, they're safe? And that's why they like to come in and have these conversations. So I think it's important. But at the same time, sometimes women don't feel safe to open up. They feel like they're going to be judged. And so having a women-only space sometimes, or I should call it a women-focused space, to initiate the conversation, bring in men to have that conversation after sort of you've had the opportunity to speak, it just makes it a little safer. They feel more comfortable talking with other women who have had similar experiences and have walked in the same space as they have. And then later say, hey, here are the common themes that we've heard in this conversation. Let's bring the men in and talk about these common themes and how as allies can you support them? And I think there's a differing conversation between the two. So it's certainly why we like to have both. I know for me, I create the allies and women meetings and events, but sometimes we just have our women focused events because we need to have a space where we can just be open and talk about things that, the men aren't even going through, but yet women have to deal with, like menopause and perimenopausal and periods and pregnancy and from a female space or leading in your being a leader in your feminine space and what that looks like, or being the only woman in the room for a minute, right? Just, you've got mentors and people in the space who can say, hey, here's how I handle that situation. And sometimes folks are not as comfortable opening up about, how do you deal with, when you need to pump for milk and you're in a 4-hour design meeting. Has anybody ever experienced that? And how do I deal with that? These are things that women deal with directly, and sometimes they're personal.
Yeah. And it could make it uncomfortable if men are present. So it's very important that we focus the conversation on, if we are bringing into a co-ed space to talk about co-ed situations and challenges.
Right.
So in that instance, we were talking about wellness and health. And we were talking about, different personality types and how you're able to build relationships and build community. So we were trying to cover topics that were kind of co-ed focused and not specifically woman focused, which also helps to create that conversation and drive that conversation. But you're right. We absolutely deserve spaces that we can be comfortable with other women for other women, scenarios that we only face.
Yeah. And because so many times we're still going back to our companies where we work and we're the only woman in the room. So this is the only time I sometimes get that women face-to-face opportunities. So thank you, Renae, so much for having this really tough conversation. It's sensitive, but I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing your story, sharing the tools that people can use to take into the future and really drive a future where women feel safe and men know how to be allies to them. And one day it'll be just as many women than men, and maybe we aren't having this conversation anymore. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching this episode of Hands on Heroes. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click on the bell to get notified every Thursday that a new video has been posted. And while we're here, check out another episode. Also, if you're interested in joining the mission, either as a guest speaker or sponsor, visit handsonheroes.net for more information or reach out to us directly at info@handsonheroes.net.